To be honest, if Minato and Kushina had survived, pretty much nothing in the series would be the same. Naruto's home dynamic would be different, the village's dynamics would be different, and to be honest, Orochimaru would never have been a threat to begin with. Minato would probably stomp half of the cast of the series with mid to low difficulty, at least up into the Fourth Shinobi World War era. I mean, unless we're going to say that Sage Mode Naruto is stronger than Sage Mode Minato, which, actually, is that true? I don't think it's true. I'm a Dragon Ball scaler, not Naruto. But yeah, a lot of things would have changed. Minato is no pushover, so where Hiruzen failed, Minato would not. That's particularly why there's currently a Fourth Shinobi World War. I don't see Minato handing over Hizashi, so yeah, either there would be a war or just intimidation from Konoha that puts Kumo back in its place. Possibly the latter, but considering that I've already done that before, I thought, let's throw in a war. And now, Kakashi has no legs. Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, only 25% of our viewers are subscribed, so if you're a fan of the video, please like and double check if you are subscribed, and with that out of the way, let's get into the video. As Kakashi laid there in a hospital bed, he didn't even have the strength to cover his face with his gaiter anymore. It was taken off of him, and he no longer cared to hide it. That mask was once used to hide him from the shame his father brought upon him, but now shame was all he felt, and there was no need for a mask. As he laid there, staring out the window, he thought about how he had failed his master. He kept seeing it replaying in his head over and over again. How Panzer, somehow still alive, had blown the bridge up with Naruto still on it. Kakashi had been blown back by the blast, the concussive forces having caused severe internal bleeding. He almost died. To a degree, Kakashi wished that he had. But he didn't. He had survived, and now was left with only his thoughts and the aching pain in his limbs that were no longer there. No legs, only one arm, and it wasn't even his good arm, it was his non-dominant. Earlier that morning, Might Guy paid him a visit in the hospital, bringing him flowers, chocolates, and balloons, and a get well letter. He sang a song he made up called Get Better Soon My Eternal Rival, and he brought, well, you know Might Guy. All the while, he thought back about the bridge still. After the flames had died down, they checked the rubble and found no trace of either Naruto or Panzer, which was no surprise. The heat and the blast were so powerful that it likely vaporized everything. Nothing was left of Naruto. There wasn't even anything they could send home to Kushina and Minato. That was one thing Kakashi was glad he didn't have to do. If he had been well, it would have been his responsibility to tell Minato and Kushina, but because he was hospitalized, that had been pushed off to someone else. Kakashi was glad for that, because he didn't think he could dare to look his mentor in the eyes. Minato and Kushina were at home. Kushina was attempting to wash the dishes, and Minato was tickling her. She laughed loudly and uncontrollably. "Minato, stop! I'm gonna pass out!" She then went on the counter-offensive, reaching back to get his ribs. Minato laughed. Stepping back to catch his breath, Kushina was on him in a moment, with more tickling. She had gained the advantage and would not stop even if he cried for mercy. His only resort was to freak her out. Having gotten a bit too close, Minato stuck his tongue out and licked her forehead, causing her to recoil in surprise and shock. She raised a brow. Minato smiled. It worked, didn't it? Kushina smiled and wiped her forehead with the dish towel. Walking over to him, she put her arms around his neck loosely and gave him a kiss. "I love you," she said. Minato giggled. "I love you too." He looked around. "Say, you know Naruto's not home, right?" Kushina shook her head and walked back to the sink. "I got chores to do, Minato." Minato nodded. "Yeah, but those can wait. Besides, didn't you say you wanted to try for a girl next? What was it you wanted to name her? Akane?" Kushina looked back. "Yes, but only if she doesn't inherit your mop of a head like Naruto did." "And if she does," Minato asked, "then we name her after you too. Another toe name. Minato, Naruto, Boruto, the line'll never end." Minato smiles as he thinks about it. "I hope her hair is red like yours. The kids at the academy will make fun of her," Kushina said. "And she'll kick their asses just like you did." Kushina surrendered to his point. "I did kick a lot of ass when I was younger." "It's what attracted me to you," Minato said. Kushina turned around to face him again. "You smooth talker. You're really down bad, aren't ya? Maybe I want to have another while we're still young. I mean, we are both 36. How much longer do you think that window's gonna stay open?" Kushina sighed. She dropped the towel. "All right, let's go then." As they were leaving the kitchen though, the doorbell rang. "Oh, who is it, I wonder?" Kushina asked. "If we're quiet, maybe they'll go away," Minato said as he was ready to sneak away from the door. "Minato, don't be rude." She opened the door to see Inoichi Yamanaka standing there in his long black coat. To his side was Ibiki Marino, Mrs. Namikaze. Kushina felt a sudden sense of dread. "Ino, we've known each other long enough to be on a nicknames basis. What's up?" Inoichi took a deep breath and strained it out as a groan. "Kushina, it's Naruto. There was an accident, and your son was killed in action." Kushina's face turned white as her pupils dilated. She didn't even respond. "Kushina," Inoichi asked, "are you okay?" Without even blinking or moving more than a slight disoriented sway, she spoke. "Yeah, I'm fine. Goodbye." She closed the door. Ibiki looked over. "Wow, she took that better than expected." Inoichi shook his head. "No, she didn't." As the door closed behind her, she pressed her back up against it. Minato was standing on the stairs, leaning up against the wall. He purred at her. "Well, aren't you a fine cat? What brings you to this alleyway?" Kushina didn't react. She just continued to stare straight through him. Immediately, Minato knew something was up. "Ku? What's wrong? Who was that?" Kushina covered her face as if she were going to puke, but instead, all that came out of her mouth was a high-pitched squelch. Her back slid against the door as her legs gave out. Minato rushed down the stairs to help her. "Kushina!" He held her. "What's wrong?" Kushina finally blinked, 2 massive tears rushing out of each of her eyelids. "It's Naruto. He's been killed." Minato's eyes widened. "What?" "They said he was killed in action." Minato was concerned now. "That's not true. There's no way that's true. I trained him myself. He's no idiot." He helps her stand and walks her to the couch. "Sit here. I'm gonna go figure this out." He then walked back to the door, opened it up, and went out towards the Hokage's office. As soon as he entered, he walked to the receptionist. "You're in a hurry," she said, pointing down at his feet that were dirty from the long walk, having forgotten to put his shoes on. "Records," he demanded. "Records," she repeated. "Is there an echo?" Minato said. "Records." The receptionist, startled by this outburst, stood up, got the keys, and walked with him to the back room. She opened the door. He began going through files. Naruto, 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 Naruto. He kept looking, but didn't find anything. "It's not in here. Maybe it was a false alarm?" Just then, Irika walked in the room. "Lord Fourth," he said. He seemed to almost try to hide a file he was holding. "What's that in your hand?" Minato asked. "My hand?" "Show it," Minato demanded. Irika, starting to sweat, offered the file to Minato. He opened the folder and began to look through. It was a file on Naruto. The top of it was stamped in big capital letters. K-I-A. Minato saw it and took a deep breath. No. There's a mistake here. This can't be true. There has to be a mistake, Minato said. "I'm sorry, sir, but it's the truth." Minato shook his head. "It's not. There's no body recorded in this file. That's not KIA, that's MIA, which means there's still a good chance he's alive. Shinobi go MIA all the time and still find their way back to the village. It's common." "No, Lord Fourth. This time it's KIA." "You don't know that," Minato shouted. "Yes, I do," Irika shouted back. He immediately regretted that as he seemed to sink down into his own shoulders and look away. "I'm sorry, Lord Fourth. Naruto was close to me, too." Minato shook his head in confusion. "How do you know?" Minato asked. Irika finally locked eyes with Minato again. "Because Kakashi witnessed it." "Kakashi? Is he here?" Minato asked. "In the village." Irika nodded. "He's currently in the intensive care unit." Minato pushed by. "Lord Fourth, wait!" Minato exited the building again, moving through the streets, not caring about the mud and broken glass he would step in. He was a man on a mission. What mattered now was Naruto. Anything else could come later. He stopped by the hospital door and walked in. The first thing the nurse did was comment on Minato's bare feet and how uncouth it was. Minato ignored her. "Where's Kakashi Hatake?" "Kakashi Hatake?" The nurse knew better than to question the Hokage. He would be in room 404. Minato would walk past her. "Hey, wait, you can't go up unannounced." Minato was already gone. Taking the elevator up, he strode past doctors and nurses alike until he came to room 404. "Kakashi," he said as he opened the door. He looked in and saw Kakashi laying there, a stump of a man with only one good limb. In that moment, it all hit Minato. Naruto's dead, isn't he? Kakashi looked away from Minato, turning on his side. Minato fell to his knees. He was staring at the floor, squeaky clean, the only blemish being the color of red blood and brown mud-shaped footprints that he had created. He could see his own reflection right now, but in it, he didn't see his own face. The face of Naruto. That face quickly faded into his own as tears hit the ground. "How did it happen?" Minato asked. Kakashi was silent. "How did it happen?" Minato snapped. "It's in the file," Kakashi shouted before turning his head again. Minato stood and walked over, turning Kakashi on his side with force, drawing a cry. "This isn't how I taught you to act. This isn't how a team leader acts. He was your responsibility. Now tell me what happened." Kakashi had hoped that this wouldn't happen, but it seemed that fate would not stop taking a dump on him. As if he hadn't been traumatized enough, he now had to explain to his master how he had committed the ultimate failure. Kakashi took a deep breath. The mission you said would be fine. The one you said wasn't cursed. It was cursed. Halfway through enemy lines, we were ambushed. So many Kumo nin. Minato listened intently. A big tank of a man appeared with a freaking cannon over his shoulder. We were attacked. We defeated his squad at first, but he took a hostage, Sakura. Then, when we chased after, we found them in a cave. It was Konoha Bridge all over again. But the difference was we escaped the collapse before it occurred. Everyone made it out okay. I was so sure everything was going to work out. Then, when we got to the bridge, we started setting up the TNT. We met at the rendezvous point and Naruto wasn't there. I went back to find him, only to find that bastard of a man, Panzer, had him in his arms. I tried to negotiate him free. I was a second away from using Kamui to take the bastard's head off, but before I could, he blasted the TNT, killing himself and Naruto. I only escaped with my life because I was on the edge of the bridge. Minato, hearing the story, took up a seat and sat down. He was just processing it all. Kakashi looked over at Minato. I did everything I could possibly do, Minato. You know that. I'd have died to protect him if I could. Minato kept his gaze fixed on its place on the floor. I know you would have, he said lightly, still in thought. In truth, it wasn't really Kakashi's fault, and Minato couldn't really blame him. He knew his student, and knew how well he was trained. He couldn't blame him. He really would have died just to protect Naruto, so if Kakashi said there was nothing to be done, then Minato knew it had to be true. I'm sorry, Minato-sensei, Kakashi said. Minato's eyes looked over at Kakashi for a moment before returning to the floor. You didn't do anything wrong, Minato said. You tried your best. I'm sorry if I'm making you feel guilty. It's not my intent. I just don't know what to do. This was so unexpected. Kakashi sat back. This is why I never wanted to leave Anbu. Minato's hand rested on Kakashi's shoulder. Kakashi, don't blame yourself anymore. It wasn't your fault. I should have trained him better. Kakashi shook his head. No, that was my responsibility. If I had trained him better, he wouldn't have been killed. Minato stood. Where are you going? Kakashi asked. Minato looked down. Home. I have to tell Kushina. He then began to back out of the room, leaving only dirty footprints behind. The walk home felt unbearable. How was he ever going to confirm to Kushina that Naruto truly was dead? As he walked down the street, he stopped and noticed a playground. On that playground was a father and son. The dad was holding the son up above his head as his son held his arms out like an airplane's wings. Minato fell to his knees. Grabbing at his face as if he could somehow peel the sorrow away, he began to cry. Naruto, he said, unable to hide his emotion any further. Things were only now starting to truly set in. He beat his fist into the dirt, not once, not twice, but many times. He smashed his fist into the ground until it bled. He growled. How could he have let this happen? He had given Naruto everything he believed he needed to survive. Making his way home, he didn't want to open the door. He was afraid of what might happen. He didn't know what to say. He just stood there for a while, not wanting to enter, because he felt like if he entered, it would all be final. It was as if this were a dream, or a fake world he could leave at any moment. But he felt as though if he opened the door, he would make it into this new reality, and he wasn't ready to admit that. He wasn't ready to take this as his new normal. He didn't want to live with this scar forever. He just wanted to... The door opened up slowly. Kushina was standing on the other side, her eyes looking at him with concern. His face, surprised and shocked, the two simply stared at each other for a moment. Kushina looked down at Minato's feet and his pants. His clothes were splattered with mud, and Minato looked as if he had fallen out the back of a garbage truck. She knew it was grief. Looking back at his face, her eyes began to overrun with tears again, as she knew this was the confirmation of the thing she never wanted to admit. She fell into his arms and wailed. The neighbors heard it, but didn't look. They had all lived through war, and many of them understood that pain. The sound of Kushina's crying had once been the same sounds they had made. This was not the time to snoop. It was a time to let them have their privacy, because it was only when people broke down in public that you knew that they needed privacy most. Minato couldn't help but cry too. He wished he could turn back time or rewrite fate, but he couldn't. He was just a man with a title in a ninja village, nothing more. So the best they could do was console each other. Time would pass, but the scars never could heal. No matter what they did, it didn't raise their moods, and so Minato simply went back to work. The village needed him, and the longer that he spent away from work, the more that he'd be tempted to fall deeper into depression. He had always been told that the best way to keep yourself from being self-pitying is to inject yourself into the hardship of others. Join a soup kitchen, do something that showed you how much people hurt, and maybe it could help you cope with your own pain. Minato, knowing Kushina was in a tough spot, actually had her head over to a charitable organization that would produce food for those who were in poverty, and with many people dying in the war, families were left without patriarchs. The wives often had nowhere to go to feed their children. He knew Kushina would be able to handle it. She was strong and wouldn't give in. This was the most hurt she'd ever felt, and it was here, at her weakest, that the nine-tailed demon fox was trying to whisper in her ear. Minato was doing everything he could to counteract what it was saying, but there were times when he worried about her. That's why he made the personal request to Makoto Uchiha to join Kushina if she could. She needed a positive influence at all times to ensure that she never gave in to the Nine-Tails' manipulation. Now Minato was focusing on himself. He would neglect himself every day if Kushina needed it, but now that he had time to himself, he attempted to drown himself in his own work. He sat there, reading over requests with his stamp set. There were 2 boxes on his desk. One said in, the other said out. Taking a piece of paper from the inbox, he would read over the request while trying to manage the budget in his head. Denied, he said as he put it into the out. He then read the next one, infrastructure repair. He thought about the mud and glass he had stepped on and the potholes around the village. Approved. He then put that in the outbox too. He then continued looking over the rest of the requests as a knock on his door was heard. Come in, he called out. The door opened. It was Hiruzen. Oh, Lord Third, what can I do for you? We've known each other far too long to continue using those tired old titles. Minato smiled. Of course. What can I do for you, Hiruzen? I just stopped by to see if you'd like a break. Minato shook his head and went back to work. Sorry, I got a lot to do. I can't afford a break right now. He stamped another piece of paper. Hiruzen shook his head. Minato, you've done 3 days worth of work in 2 days. When was the last time you ate? Minato stopped and thought about it before looking to the clock. It said 3 p.m. He thought back. 8 hours ago? Hiruzen sighed. Yes, Minato, you need a break. Minato seemed that he didn't want to for a moment before looking at Hiruzen's expression that told him he wasn't going to take no for an answer. Relenting, Minato stood. Grabbing his haori, he followed Hiruzen. Hiruzen walked out to a nearby barbecue spot where they'd both be provided meat to cook on their own. They reserved a spot for 2 people, as well as a platter of some of the finer meats and some sauces to go with it. Hiruzen led him to the table and sat down across from Minato. He let out a sigh and a smile. Isn't this just the best, Minato? Hiruzen asked as Minato sat down as well. It's pretty good, yeah. Hiruzen took a deep breath through his nose. You smell that? That's why this is my favorite restaurant. It's one thing to be served delicious food. It's another to make it yourself. Then why go out at all? Why not stay home, Minato asked. Because it's fun. Surely you would know. All through my time grooming you for the Hokage position, you became the village authority of fun. Remember the time you wanted to throw a piñata party for my retirement? Yeah, it was gonna be filled with sardine fish balls, Minato chuckled. Looking back, I'm glad we didn't do that. It would have stank. The platter of food came. Hiruzen bowed his head. We are grateful, he said. Minato following suit. Hiruzen then put some meat on the grill. Minato did as well. The sound of sizzling could be heard as Hiruzen watched the meat. I like mine a little on the rarer side. He would pull some off once it had enough char. He dipped it into the soy sauce and took a bite. Minato followed suit. So, about how much you've been working. You've worked more than enough to take a day or two. Go out to the movies or do something with Kushina. You can't work all the time. I don't think so, Hiruzen. It's just best I keep going. A little silence ensued. Hiruzen then put a piece of meat onto the center of the grill over the hottest spot. He just watched it. Minato looked at him and the piece of meat. He put his own on and cooked it before eating it. By the time Minato was ready for another go-around, that piece of meat was still cooking. I thought you liked it rare, Minato said. I do, Hiruzen said as he watched the meat burn. Well then, take it off, it's burning. Hiruzen spoke. You know, we're like this meat. Minato looked up at Hiruzen with confusion. Huh? Hiruzen poked at the meat with his chopsticks. It was hard as rock, black as coal, and smelled like soot. When a man works, he grills himself. The harder the job, the hotter the coals. The longer you're exposed to those coals, the more cooked you begin to feel, both inside and outside. Hiruzen picked it up and looked it over. The job of Hokage is the hottest grill imaginable. Eat this piece of meat, Minato. I'd rather not. Exactly, Hiruzen said. Nobody wants to eat this piece of barbecue. The taste is hellish. That's what's happening to you now, Minato. You're this piece of barbecue. You're cooking yourself till there's nothing left. Minato sighed. Hiruzen continued. Minato, throwing yourself into work is a good distraction, and sometimes that's what people need, distractions. Sometimes when you're not wanting to think about something, throwing yourself into your work stops being a chore and becomes more of a welcome relief. But the pain you feel is not removed, only masked. You do need to eventually realize that this isn't going to be sustainable forever. Overworking yourself can and will kill you, especially when you do it so you can neglect yourself in some degree. I understand what you mean, Hiruzen, but is it not a good thing for me to throw myself into my work like this? Doesn't it help people? I don't think it does, Minato, Hiruzen said. Just today, going into your office, I saw that you approved the budget for a personal clown for academy students. Is that so wrong? Minato asked. No, not really, except you approved the budget for 15 of them. That's a whole circus, Minato. You're making the Ringling Brothers an academic option in our schools. Minato thought about it. I thought it would make the kids happy. Hiruzen smiled and shook his head. It would, yes, but it's not something they need while in school. And even if it were so, we would only need one, and we could make it one of the teachers for heaven's sake. Minato, you're distracting yourself from the pain, but you're not dealing with the crisis in your heart, and it's making you sloppy. You can't run the village in this condition, nor can you fight a war like this. I know you're a tough man, Minato, but you need to admit that there's a problem, and you need to figure out how to fix it. That's the adult thing to do. You and your wife need to talk this out, and if that doesn't work, go to a therapist together. There's nothing shameful about taking care of yourself. But when others are in the same position as me, Minato asked. Nobody's in the same position as you, Minato. The only person who ever was myself. Konohamaru's father. He was my son. He was Asama's brother. He and his wife were both in the Third Shinobi World War together. I loved my son and I loved his wife too. They made me a grandfather. But right there toward the hairy end, they got themselves killed. It put a hole in my heart so large that I couldn't close it myself. It was because I refused to do anything with it that I lost my position. I sued for unconditional peace, something the rest of the village said was nothing short of surrender. I did it because I didn't want the war to continue out of fear I'd lose Asama too, or Konohamaru. I let my feelings subconsciously alter my decisions and made a mistake. I threw myself at my work and tried to avoid talking about it, and that led to one of the greater blunders in my whole career. I just don't want to see you make the same mistake. If I were you, or if I could go back to that time and do it all over again, I would have realized that it's okay to be human and leave the responsibilities to others when they could handle it and go get help myself. There's nothing wrong with that. A healthy Hokage means a healthy village. An unhealthy Hokage could be the death of a village. Does that make sense to you, Minato? Minato sighed. It does, but how can I do that now? Who can I leave the position to? Hiruzen sat forward. Minato, you have resources, and the village has failsafes just in case a situation like this does happen. One of those failsafes is me. If ever you're left unable to do your job, the position falls back to me temporarily until either you recover or a new Hokage is appointed. I'm healthy now, Minato. I won't screw this up again. You just need to give me the reins and take a break. Minato thought about it. You're right. I need to take a break. Do you think you can do this for me, Hiruzen? I really need it. Hiruzen smiled. Of course, Minato. And so the two finished their meal together. They each paid half of the bill and began to head out. Minato and Hiruzen would head back to the office. Once he entered it, Minato looked around. You sure you're up for this? Hiruzen laughed. Of course, my boy. I've been through far worse than this. You go pick up Kushina and have some fun. Hiruzen sat down at his desk. Immediately, the phone rang. Minato, curious as to what he would say, waited a moment. Hello? Yes. Yeah, he's... Oh, I'll tell him. Yes, thank you. He hung up the phone. Minato, that was Makoto Uchiha. She called out from the shelter. Minato's eyes widened a little. Is everything okay? She said Kushina got sick and needed to go home, Hiruzen said. She was calling to tell you that you need to check up on her. You should go home now, Minato. Your wife needs you. Minato nodded. Thanks, Hiruzen. He then rushed out the door. Minato couldn't stop thinking about her. What could be wrong? Was she all right? He was halfway between a sprint and a jog as he made his way through the streets to their home. As he got to the door, he unlocked it and opened it up. Kushina! There was nothing. Ku? He closed the door behind him. The lights were off. He walked through the bottom floor and saw no lights. His heart began to beat a little louder. Kushina! He called out again. There was no answer. All the worst things began to run through his mind. He hopped over the railing of the stairs and began to run up them, nearly tripping twice. Kushina! There was a light on at the end of the hall in the bedroom. He entered the room. Ku? She wasn't there, but he heard a sound. Sniffling. It was coming from the bathroom. He walked over to it and opened the door to see Kushina sitting on the side of the tub beside the toilet. Her eyes were wide and full of tears. Minato walked over and quickly gazed into the toilet. There was no vomit, so maybe she was okay? He knelt down beside her. He looked at her face and pushed some of her red hair out of the way. "Ku, are you okay?" It was then that he realized she was trembling. "Ku, are you having another panic attack? Are you okay? What do you need me to do to help you feel better?" She looked at him and shook her head. "It's too soon," she said. He was confused. "What do you mean? Do you need me to give you some space?" She shook her head again. She held up a pregnancy test that came back positive. "It's too soon." Tears began to run down her cheeks. Minato's heart was filled with a myriad of different emotions, and all of them called forth tears at once. He kissed her cheek and hugged her. "It's okay, Ku. Everything's okay. I promise." It was so dark. It was cold. It was so painful. It hurt so bad. Naruto tried to open his eyes. The sudden pain rushed through his body. "Ah!" he cried out. He tried to move, but the pain spiked further. "Ah!" he shouted as he sat back. "I wouldn't do that," a voice said as Naruto began to settle. Naruto turned his head to the side in confusion. "Who are you?" A masked man was sitting by a throne. "You can call me Toby." "What happened?" Naruto asked. "You were on mission, sabotaging a bridge, planning to destroy it. Then that large fellow grabbed hold of you and attempted to kill himself, taking you with him." "So then, I'm dead?" he asked. The masked man got up off the chair and walked closer. "No, far from it. You're alive, but you sustained various burns and injuries from the explosion. I had to personally reconstruct your body. That's the pain you're feeling now. Your nerves are connecting to this new flesh I grafted in." Naruto looked down and realized that both of his legs and much of his lower half were pale as a ghost, his right arm also being made of the same strange material. "Don't worry, it's completely biological. Grafted to your body, genetically altered to include your DNA. It's a miracle matter, to be honest. Made of the cells of the greatest shinobi to ever live." Naruto looked up at the man. "Why did you save me?" Toby began to walk back to the throne. He sat down. "Because I once laid in the bed you're laying in now. I saw a part of myself in you. I thought that maybe you could use a hand." Naruto was laying there. "Thanks. I appreciate it." "Did you somehow get the idea that I did this out of the goodness of my heart?" Toby asked. "No. I sympathize with you, yes, but I could also use you. You see, I have a plan that will end this wretched Fourth Shinobi World War, and I need you to help me. Now that everyone thinks you're dead and have moved on, I think you should be of plenty use to me." "They won't think I'm dead for long. I plan to go back to Konoha." Toby laughed. "You really think anyone there cares that you're gone?" "I'm sure people have greater worries on their mind than me," Naruto said, "but I know my parents are surely missing me. I need to go to them and let them know that I'm okay." Toby chuckled. "No, they've already moved on. Your parents have already started the process of replacing you." "What?" Naruto asked. Toby nodded with faux sympathy. "News only hit a month ago, and already they've gotten themselves pregnant with a new child." "I bet that's painful to hear," Toby said as his Sharingan began to spin. Naruto, looking into it, began to see a lot of things differently. "That hurts so much," he said. "I'm sure it does. Well, you're dead to them. Why not let them be dead to you and focus less on what once was and instead on what can be? There's a future for us, Naruto. A future without war. All you need to do is be strong enough to fight for it. Strong enough to fight for it." Pause. Yeah, I bet you're craving a little more right now, aren't ya? Well, don't worry, there is plenty more on the way. You just gotta wait a little while longer. Oh, don't be so sad, it won't be long. That being said, leave a comment down below. What do you think Naruto's sibling should be? A boy or a girl? And if it's a boy or a girl, what should their name be? Which parent should they take after most? Let me know in the comments, and whichever comment has the most comments affirming it, or whichever idea I like most, will be the idea I go with. So let's go, people. Start breaking out those OCs. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified when that new video drops. Also, be sure to check out these other great videos from our channel. Until next time, peace out.